Gerald, thanks for signing in. It's now 2:01. We'll just give it another 4 minutes to start to see how much we can fill up the room, and then we'll get going. Thank you so much for signing in. Thank you. We'll start at 2:05. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to TNP's Fireside Chat. My name is Baba Lokolaro, and I'm TNP's managing partner. And I welcome you all once again to this Fireside Chat, the second in the series that we're holding. We started yesterday with Chika Mobi of Decagon, and today we have none other as the guest in the person of Olumide Soyombo, popularly known on social media as Otumba Show, a really good friend of mine and my brother. In celebrating World IP Day, we're pleased to hold this second leg of our two-part series. We've tagged it TNP's Fireside Chat with Olumide Soyombo specifically. This year's theme is IP and SMEs, taking your ideas to market. And we have designed the Fireside Chat to just provide a platform for startups SMEs, and creatives to learn and gain insight into their intellectual property rights and how to commercialize it. Whilst we've taken this from a global outlook, it's important for us to also consider our local issues at this time. I must say it's a very, very sad time for Nigeria. What we've witnessed and heard in the past couple of days is completely unfathomable. So I'll ask everyone please, in your own quiet moments at some point in time today, to just give a thought, give a prayer, say a few words to our Lord in respect of these, our brothers and sisters. Thank you. Olumide is going to discuss broadly on issues that we have distilled down to 2 points. The first is building ingenious ideas and how to leverage on them to become IP assets. The second is how business owners can leverage on and commercialize their IP assets. If I may give a brief introduction and just tell you a little bit about Olumide. He's a techpreneur, he's a business development strategist, and an investor of sorts. I say he's got the Midas touch. He's got about 20 years multi-sectoral experience building and managing businesses while investing in both high-impact projects and startups. He positions himself as a leading voice and valuable player within the African tech and startup space. His work is an offshoot of his understanding of the possible ecosystem impact inherent in strategic partnerships between tech innovators, technological entrepreneurship, and private capital. He's a co-founder at Blue Chip Technologies and LeadPath. At Blue Chip, he leads strategy, business development, and global expansion as he works to build the company into a tech industry leader. At LeadPath, a seed capital investment fund dedicated to local tech startups, he focuses on powering revolutionary innovations and ideas in Africa by bridging the gap between the startup stage and market dominance through funding and structural support, precisely the reason why we're here. Olumide is an angel investor and investor educator who believes in the potentials of African technological innovations. He has invested in over 30 startups, including many of the leading tech startups in Nigeria like Paystack, Exited, Piggyvest, TeamAct, Trove, Mono, VertoFX, Lemonade, Bedu, etc., etc. I think Olumide has missed one out here that we both invested in, but I guess that is because the jury is still out on that. He continues to pursue excellence and strategic impact, even as he inspires the same in others. Participants, I welcome Olumide Soyombo to our fireside chat. Olumide, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, Baba. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So let's just go straight into it because we don't intend to spend more than 25 minutes on this, even though we spent closer to an hour yesterday. I'll say to you, as one of our key stakeholders in technology and innovation, what would you consider to be SME's greatest assets, Nigerian SME's greatest assets?
Okay, I think for me, right, from being an entrepreneur and then also being an investor, it's always with the people. And I think the greatest asset of any SME starts with the people. And that's what every investor also looks like, looking at the team, looking at the people behind whatever product or whatever idea that they have. Because it's the people, you have no ideas without the people. The people are the ones who generate the ideas. People are the ones who generate those products. So it starts with the people, and obviously what comes from those set of people would then be the unique products and unique ideas that they come up with, which then becomes valuable. But it all starts with the people, and that's why you would see when we're backing any company, I typically just start with the team, because I know that the team would figure out different approaches to solve problems, right? I always give a good example of when we invested in Piggyvest. They were started out as something called Push CV, all right? And So they were able to iterate from Push CV to something else that became Piggyvest. And those products that they came up with were also good assets for them, but they all started with the people. So it starts from the people and then what they can produce.
Excellent. So you heard it. It's the people, it's team, creating solutions.
Correct.
These people, these teams, by creating solutions, obviously are using some measure of intellectual property as an asset and bringing in their creativity towards establishing a solution.
Correct.
Now, ideas are a dime a dozen. And I always tell people this, you and I can have the same idea right now.
Yeah.
It all depends on who takes advantage of it very quickly. So you
do you find that once you have an idea and you share it, all of a sudden everybody has the same idea?
Straight. It's real. And I say to people, even lawyers, you've got an idea, put it down in writing and let's quickly execute. Let's go to market very quickly with it.
Sure.
So now, how would you advise business managers manage their IP assets in the face of burgeoning competition? And this could come from the fact that I've got a bunch of fantastic, brilliant kids working for me who are innovative stuff, innovative guys. They're, you know how you tech-minded guys are. They're just coming up with damn it dozen these ideas. They're just bubbling. Now, how do you advise a business manager manage now these people, the IP assets that they've come up with? Who owns it? Is it the entrepreneur that quickly automatically gets an assignment of rights when he hires them? Does he take a license, or does he just leave it with them and say, well, maybe this is part of what we will use in perhaps giving you some, looking at an employee share benefit scheme or what have you? I just want, generally our startups, SME owners to have an understanding of what an investor like yourself would advise that you do with this kind of creative IP assets in the face of competition, because everybody around you too, whether it is business A and business B being competitive in the market space, you need to find some kind of competitive edge on how you deal with your people. Your words.
Okay. I think the first thing is the first thing to highlight for me would be there is good competition, right? And good competition also fosters innovation. So I feel we need to protect IP assets and rights. It needs to be protected within reason, because you'll find out on one side of the scale, entrepreneurs are saying, what's the incentive for an SME to innovate if his intellectual property can't be protected? So you come up with a product today, and then all of a sudden there are knockoffs everywhere, and obviously you can't monetize and you can't get money back into the business to keep on innovating. So that's one side of where obviously IP rights protection becomes very, very important, because then it can foster innovation. And competition obviously again, and protects you from certain attacks from competition. But then on the other side of the scale, you have there's certain times when IP rights can be, what I say, overprotected, and it then prevents others from building and advancing on that. I'll give you a very good example that comes to mind. Recently, there was the running popular case between Google and Oracle. So Oracle had bought Sun Microsystems, owners of Java, and obviously Oracle then had the rights to the Java program. And Oracle sued Google for copyright infringement on using, for $9 billion actually, for using the Java program in developing the Android operating system. Google, in its defense, was saying it was fair use. They just used the building blocks and the APIs, which they believe should have been open to everybody, because at the end of the day, the consumers are the ones who benefit. Went to the courts, the different courts, some ruled in favor of Oracle, some then ruled in favor of Google, and then got to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court then ruled in favor of Google, saying that it was within fair use. It was minimal use also, and then what they built on it was to the benefit of several consumers at the end. But what got to me, what struck me in that case around competition was, imagine if it was a small company. Now it's two giants fighting, right? But imagine if it was a small company that had been taken advantage of in that way, and they had no money they couldn't monetize whatever they felt they had built, and that privilege was then abused. So I feel managing IP rights management, obviously, there is a balancing act between protecting those rights and then opening certain things that allow for advancement and innovation. That's why exactly every SME has to obviously register bona fide IP assets, have a legal firm or retainer that protects this, because you see it even today with many of our fintechs, right? You find the company has become very successful, and then you see several flavors of that company all of a sudden turning up, right? You would see, I know even if you go on Instagram today, you would see on different social media platforms, you will see one knockoff of one fintech product or the other, and even with the play on their names, right? And then all of a sudden, there's fraud that's happening. They're taking over advantage of those unsuspecting customers just because those guys haven't taken the right steps in protecting themselves from competition. So we're seeing that happen. So I feel that it's a balancing act, like I said, on certain things that need to be protected, and then certain things that also need to be protected while being opened up to allow for innovation.
Now, I could say very easily that it's easy for you to say because you're lawyered up at home. Your wife's a lawyer. So, I mean, you took the right steps very quickly in time. But Olumide's advice to all of you truly is you need to lawyer up in managing your IP assets amongst business managers and owners, either of startups or SMEs. He's advised a reasonability factor. Let's not be too unreasonable to the point where we stultify business, we stultify creativity. He's given the example of Oracle and Google. But let's move on from there, and let's come back home a little and look at an area that is capable of astronomically blowing up, and I use the words blowing up our economy if we as a people, we as businesses, regulators and government were to take complete advantage of it. And now, I'm going into AI and blockchain. Okay. Topical conversation at the moment. What would you say needs to be done to have our local businesses, take advantage of this unique space? It's a huge. This is a very broad question, but I mean, as best as you can, what can the businesses do? What can government do? Because I think we're losing so much.
Yes, I think the first thing is just because it's hot doesn't mean it's right for you as an SME, right? So because especially when everybody wants to follow a fad or follow a trend, I've seen so many decks today where the founders just throwing some AI buzzword on their products just so that it makes it look snazzy, right? So the key questions to ask is, does AI or blockchain of any of these applications, what does it do for my business? Does it improve any business process? What competitive advantage does it even give your company, right? So for example, a fintech can say, okay, with blockchain and the use of a distributed ledger, which blockchain allows you have, it can reduce processing fees. It can reduce processing fees for transactions. Just recently, I was reading a comment from the Association of Bureau de Change operators, and the guy was petitioning the CBN, saying the CBN needs to come harder on some of the crypto companies who are riding on, obviously, using blockchain technology, because they're able to provide settlement faster than the traditional SWIFT. And I'm like, you're just saying they should come harder on people for providing a service that you're saying is real better and is even cheaper. So there has to be a real use case. I think that's the bottom line for me, not just using things for the sake of using them, right? So you find out that there are certain things that can just be easier done as opposed to trying to overcomplicate things.
Let me narrow down because I think that question is maybe too broad, and it's not going to be for everybody. It's not a one size fits all.
Sure.
But let's look at our own local issues, for instance. Okay? You're an investor, you're a businessman, a successful one at that. You're making money. When people start making money, they look at investing that money and tying down the capital in physical assets and otherwise. Maybe not so much physical assets nowadays, but it's still the traditional investment model. Now, you buy the asset, there's a registration process for that asset. there's a regulatory process for you acquiring that asset. There's a bureaucratic process when you acquire that asset.
Sure.
But that entire ecosystem can be simplified using blockchain and artificial intelligence.
Sure.
Now, not too long ago, last year, let's go back to October last year, we had a number of public buildings and registries burnt down to the ground. And you had a number of archived documentation. If I had written my will then and lodged it at the court's registry, for instance, I'd have nothing. But these are unique spots that, I think things like that, we could actually take advantage of. And that's where really I'm going.
Okay. Yeah, I think with what we are seeing with talent, right, even in our market, and how I think about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, if you talked about AI and you talked about what people were doing even around blockchain, nothing was happening, right? And it takes some couple of successes, and then all of a sudden things start to take off. So, for example, today, right, we are investing in companies that have been founded by operators who've worked in some of these other fintechs, right? So, for example, we invested in a company called Mono that was formed by an ex-Paystack engineer. Tomorrow, there'll be a founder from Binance or a founder from Bundle who then decides, hey, I've seen a certain problem that I think blockchain would be able to solve quicker, and I'm going ahead to tackle those problems. So I think, and then obviously, because it's a renowned operator, the funding would follow those operators. So I think as our ecosystem matures and we start seeing renowned operators from this innovative space, because it's very early days. I tell everybody it's still day zero. As they build out and then gain the experience to come out to solve more problems, the funding will follow them, and then we can start solving some of these issues. So I think at the end of the day, entrepreneurs will be the ones to drive some of the changes that we're looking for in each of these sectors, and the money will follow the good ones.
Yes, the same thing Chika said yesterday. The money will always come once you've got a good idea and you're able to build on that good idea, and you, from your deck and your initial seed capital and going into your series, you have a time frame within which you're raising your first series of funding and whatnot. And if you haven't done it within that time frame, then forget it. You haven't got the perfect idea. So what I've come to realize is once you've got something that is unique, that is sellable, the money would come. Now, let's imagine in my own creative space, I'm now a tech guru. I've come up with this fantastic idea. I brought up my investment deck, and I've come to you at one of your favorite spots where you support a polo team in the name of your business. By the way, Olumide is an avid polo enthusiast. I'm not sure if he plays, but I know he's a major enthusiast. And we're sharing a beer, and I say to you, my brother, I've got this idea, I'm sharing this deck with you, and I'm putting my IP rights in there and told you, look, in terms of the IP for this particular solution, it's going to sit with me. And you as an investor, you've got co-investors that are somewhere else in the world and may not particularly be enamored with Nigeria and our system and our laws, and they're not particularly comfortable, and perhaps they want the IP to sit, offshore, upstairs, where they're looking to put their investment, whether it's Mauritius, Luxembourg, somewhere else. Now, where I'm going to, as an investor, and entrepreneurs, I think sometimes they're in la la land, but hey, sorry, I'm still a budding lawyer. My creativity aspects are not that wild. You as an investor, entrepreneur, how much weight do you accord those kind of IP assets when you're looking to make an investment? Because the creative person thinks, this is me, I did it 100%, and I'm bringing it to you. I'd like to hear from you.
I think it's a very, very tricky one, and there are many war stories of several situations that have happened in this format where the entrepreneur registers some certain IP rights or even copyrights offshore, and then assigns it under license to the local to the local entity, but then offers investment to just the local entity to those investors. And then the day they have a problem, the guy who owns the entrepreneur who owns the rights offshore then says, I'm taking this off, right?
Yeah.
And then the company is left with just maybe CAC document. So I think the key value, right, I said, is it's in what, and we talked about it when we started out, about the assets the company has, right? The value that you're placing on is, yes, you're the entrepreneur, you've generated this, and it has to be warehoused within, that's where I'm investing. That's where there's value. So if it's if it's assigning rights to another person under license, you're almost like even a franchisee in the true sense of the word. So investors would not invest in a dumb shell, or good investors would not invest in a dumb shell. The rights and the property needs to be owned by the entity I'm coming in with anyway. I can speak for myself. So you've developed this idea, you built it out. The entity I'm coming in has to own those rights fully, 100%, and even can then license it to other people to earn a fee. But it has to be warehoused within that company, because at the end of the day, right, the investor is thinking, this company I'm investing in, right, what's different about them in the market? What are they doing differently? Or have they come up with a novel way to solve a particular problem, right? And that's why I'm investing. I'm investing in you. I'm investing in you coming up with this product that resides within the entity that I'm putting my money in. So it's very, very important from an investor standpoint, and savvy investors would pick this out to be able to see where those assets are being held and who those assets are assigned to. It's very important.
Excellent. One of the reasons I asked that question is that a mutual friend of ours, actually one of our mutual friends, is on this fireside chat in person of Super K, and I know he has a unique experience with this particular issue that you've just discussed. But now let's go into business owners and them, getting to leverage and commercialize their IP rights. And where am I going to here? Usually we see that the IP that our techpreneurs or our innovators create tend to resolve a local solution. They're localized, and there's nothing wrong with that. Now, how soon do you see a situation where we see IP assets developed locally being exported and used out of Africa? I know there are one or two, but how soon do you think we can see a plethora of this sort of IP assets actually be forming part of our exports and being dollar earners for a lot of our innovators?
Very, very good question. And I think I'll use myself as an example, okay? So I started out Blue Chip Technologies as an enterprise software company in 2008, right, with a gentleman called Kazim. And we built it out as a services-based company. So providing solutions to most of the banks and telcos, right, around data warehouse, enterprise resource planning applications, and enterprise business applications. What we'll typically do would be, a client has a problem, we would have our engineers and ourselves mobilize to site, solve a particular problem for that client, and then move to client B, who has the same or similar problems. And then as we were trying to scale, our own version of scaling at the time was to hire more people, right? And hire more teams to mobilize to different client sites. So you're in bank A, bank B, you're in telco A, telco B. But you find out that it's so difficult to scale such a model. And so a couple of years ago, we started saying, we've built out this experience, building out solutions for these various banks and telcos. That intellectual property that we've built, why don't we productize this, right? Bundle all of this into specific products and containers, and then brand it. So for example, we have a solution called Blue Prime that came out of us building out data warehouse applications for many of the banks. And we put all that model into a container, productized it, named it Blue Prime, and now we have a model wherein other partners in Kenya, in DRC, and other integrators can then resell this product, and I've in essence created an extension of myself, right? By creating some license regime between us and other players outside the country, and so all of a sudden you are in 6 countries at the same time. We could have continued scaling the services-based model of mobilizing teams, but how far could we have possibly gone with that? So I think even as entrepreneurs locally, we need to, and I think that's where some of the foreign players have done it way better than we have. They've been able to see how to leverage and expand those IP rights by extending it and allowing people reuse under some form of license, and then all of a sudden they can achieve scale. So that's one very good example that you would see. And if you also think about it from a commercialization point of view, you would see that if I use an example of a company like Paystack at TNP Advices, you will find that so many companies today, right, wouldn't have been built if Paystack had not built the infrastructure that it had, built. So things around recurring billing, card on file. Many companies today, some of the savings applications, some of the loan applications, are built intellectual property of what someone else had commercialized, right? And obviously, Paystack ends from people using those, from using those assets. So what I'm saying in essence is there are things around integrations and where you can build on and layer solutions on what people have built, and there are things around you extending yourself, right? By containerizing many of the things you've built into core products that then gives you that geographic presence or geographic expansion immediately.
Thank you very much for that. So the reality is that we are in a sub-licensing regime which needs to grow and help not just grow our people, our businesses, but also our economy. Final words, Olumide. My partner, Babajimi, was on the chat with Chika yesterday, and he asked a question which a number of stakeholders in this sector ask. In your opinion, would you say the tech space, the fintech space, is over-regulated?
Over-regulated or under-regulated?
Over-regulated.
I would say I have to dice this one.
You have to watch it.
I've looked at the attendee list very well first. Look at the attendee list before answering.
Let me change it a bit. What do you think? I mean, what do you think over-regulation would do? How do you think over-regulation would affect the tech and the tech space in general? In terms of the Nigerian economy, how do you think over-regulation would affect us?
I mean, it stifles it, definitely. And if I'm being candid, I've had instances where some of the companies we've invested in, the hammer has come down on them, and we've had to engage either with the central bank to say, this is what these guys are really doing, right? And first, because sometimes the regulator's first approach is hammer, then come back to me, and then we start discussing. But once you throw out that hammer, investor confidence is damaged all of a sudden, right? So you would see a regulator comes up with an announcement or with a declaration, and all of a sudden people in customers of that platform are all of a sudden taking their money out, right, and are moving to safety. And then even when you engage with the regulator and you make some headway, some of those customers are not just going to come back, right? And the damage has already been done. So I think the approach of hammer then coming to understand, obviously it's been the approach that we've seen in our own form of as the body language of most of the regulators, which I don't think is the right way. I think the engagement approach, and collaborative approach to say, this is what we are doing. How best? Yes, we understand that we have to be regulated, and then sitting down with those same players to sit down and engage. I think there is also the notion that we have on the private sector where we are also very bullish. We're also aloof, right? And we say, oh, these regulators, they don't even know what they are doing, or they don't know what they are saying. And you find out that even within those same regulatory bodies, there's some voice of reason even within those places. How do we make those people allies, right? And sit down with them in terms of them understanding what we are trying to do. So there needs also, on the operator side, we also need to come down from our own high horse and say, I don't think we have the monopoly of knowledge in what we are trying to do. And then obviously on the regulator side, it then means more collaboration as opposed to hammer and then let's come back to the table. So I think the regulators that have taken that hammer approach obviously have over-regulated in some form or the other. But then there's also the onus on operators to also engage constantly, not just when there's an issue.
Thank you for that. So you've heard it. There needs to be a meeting of minds. There needs to be an alliance of sorts from the operators who are usually very bullish with their businesses and would like to work in an unregulated or underregulated market. And of course, the regulator themselves need to be sensitive to this unique environment because of its buoyancy and the amount of scale we could get from it, the quantum of development our economy could receive from it. And as such, operators and regulators need to collaborate with a clear understanding also from the regulator's side. I mean, as Olumide said, most of operators think these guys don't know anything. But the reality is with technology, regulation always plays catch up anywhere in the world.
Yep.
So they may not know it when you create it, but once you've created it, they need an understanding to get what it is. And then once you're constantly engaging with the regulators, of course, the better and bigger you get, the easier and quicker it is for you to start engaging with the regulator. Sure. Dear participants, it's been a good 35 minutes speaking with Olumide Soyombo. Olumide, thank you so much for the time you spent with us today. Truly appreciated. I just want to ask now if we have any questions from the participants. Please, if you do, you can just send your questions in the chat room. If you don't, we can let Olumide Soyombo go. We'll give it a minute if there are any questions. Otherwise, we can call it a day. It seems you may have covered the entire field, like several ponies that you have in your stables. Thank you so much, Olumide. I truly appreciate it. And as for that business that we both invested in, for you, that money may have been small. It's a huge amount of money for me. It must come back. I mean, the day you told me that you made the investment, I felt more comfortable that I hadn't been foolish with my money. So I'm just waiting. I'm looking at the amen to that.
It will come back. All right, guys. Take care.
Okay. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Take care. Bye.